The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration defines distracted driving as any activity that diverts attention from driving, including talking or texting on your phone, eating and drinking, talking to people in your vehicle, and fiddling with the stereo, entertainment, or navigation system. Anything that takes your attention away from the task of safe driving. Texting is the most alarming distraction. Sending or reading a text takes your eyes off the road for 5 seconds. At 55 miles per hour, that's like driving the length of an entire football field with your eyes closed. You cannot drive safely unless the task of driving has your full attention. Any non-driving activity you engage in is a potential distraction and increases your risk of crashing. Using a cell phone while driving creates enormous potential for deaths and injuries on U.S. roads. In 2018 alone, more than 2,800 people were killed in motor vehicle crashes involving distracted drivers. On September 19, 2016, MSU freshman Mitchell Kiefer was tragically killed in an auto accident caused by a distracted driver on I-96 on Mitchell's way to the MSU campus. Steve Kiefer is Mitchell's father. Steve earned a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering from Michigan State University and is a member of the Michigan State University College of Engineering Alumni Association Advisory Board. He's GM's key executive at Michigan State University and is a member of GM's senior leadership team. He's senior vice president and president of General Motors South America and International Operations, meaning he's responsible for GM operations outside of North America and China. Soon after Mitchell's death, Steve founded the Kiefer Foundation to honor Mitchell's legacy. The mission of the Kiefer Foundation is to end distracted driving and all associated traffic deaths and injuries. The Kiefer Foundation focuses on 3 pillars to support its mission: awareness, technology, and policy. Within each of these pillars are specific goals they hope to achieve and initiatives in which they hope to get involved. They've already made some progress, but still have a long way to go. Steve, it's great to welcome you to this Spartan story inside MSU Today, and I'm just so sorry for your loss.
Well, thank you, Russ. I really appreciate, first of all, your introduction, but also your invitation for to allow me to join this podcast and really tell our story and hopefully create some additional awareness around the dangers of distracted driving.
Is there anything you would add about distracted driving to my introduction?
Well, yeah, I think the first thing I would add is, until something like this happens to you personally, I don't think you really people really understand the magnitude of this problem. And I like to point out some of the global statistics as it relates to highway safety as I start these discussions. So first, I think it's important for people to realize that around the world, because this is a global problem, around the world, 1.25 million people are killed on the highways of the world every year. 1.25 million. So it's a huge number, and some 50 million are injured or disabled every year in car crashes and pedestrian-related car crashes around the world. So the number is really quite staggering. You talked about some of the NHTSA data, and when you bring that to the U.S., we lose somewhere between 35,000 and 40,000 people on the highways of the United States each year. Again, 40,000 people, it's a staggering number. And usually when the folks that do the analysis on distracted driving, they usually estimate that about 10% of those are due to distracted driving. We honestly believe that number is way underreported. As a matter of fact, the stats would generally say that 94% of crashes that occur on the highways are due to some type of human error. So, whether it could be just speeding or drinking and driving or drowsiness, but we know a large percentage of those are distracted driving. So again, the simple stat that I think is most staggering is that in this country, 10 people every day are killed by distracted driving. And it's just, again, until you go through it, it's just hard for me to imagine that today and tomorrow and the next day, every day, we're going to have another 10 people, another 10 families going through what my family has gone through. And it really is, one of the prime motivators for us to to get something done here and really bring an end to distracted driving.
So tell us more about Mitchell and what happened.
Yeah, so the story never gets easier to tell, but as you said, it was actually September 19th of 2016, the worst day of our life. Mitchell was in his first month at MSU, and he had come home for a nice weekend to go see a Lions game, actually. And he was driving up to MSU on I-96 early Monday morning, about 7:50 in the morning. And it was a beautiful Monday morning. The sun was out, the roads were dry. No reason for a crash to occur. And unfortunately, there was a little bit of traffic congestion. The traffic slowed down. Mitchell slowed down, and unfortunately, the young lady behind him did not. She impacted Mitchell's car at about 82 miles an hour. And as most people probably know, when airbags deploy, there's a flight recording function inside modern automobiles. So you get the forensics from the vehicle. It was clear that the car was going 82 miles an hour, but also that at the time of impact, the driver's foot was on the throttle, not on the brake. So again, that's a pretty clear indication that the young lady was not paying attention and never touched the brakes. So that resulted in Mitchell being rear-ended and driven across a very narrow median on I-96 near Dietz Road, a narrow median that has had no guardrails at the time. And Mitchell was driven into oncoming traffic where he was hit by a large truck and killed instantly. So those are the circumstances. And again, it's a horrific thing to think that one small sort of act of lack of paying attention, of distraction, can just really destroy lives forever.
Again, I'm so sorry, Steve. And we did mention the 3 pillars of focus for the Kiefer Foundation are awareness, technology, and policy. Let's break those down and talk about the awareness pillar.
Yeah. So first and foremost, we felt that as we learned how large this problem is, and interestingly enough, we referred to it as a global pandemic several years ago, before the more recent pandemic, and I really believe that it is a global pandemic. This is certainly as I covered in the earlier stats, causing deaths and disabling injuries all over the world. So we felt first and foremost it was important to make as many people realize this as possible. And you do find that there's families like ours all over the country that have a similar goal. So things like advertising, billboards, a number of community events. We engaged with a nonprofit organization in Grand Rapids, Michigan, called the Kiefer Foundation, which brings simulators into schools and churches around the state and around the country to educate young people on the dangers of distracted driving. We're able to put them in a car, let them drive in a simulated fashion, and then distract them and show how it causes crashes. So these things are, sort of all in the categories of awareness. We also had the opportunity to do some things to memorialize Mitchell, but also to create awareness. So Mitchell was a hockey player. He went to Detroit Catholic Central. He was part of the 2016 state championship Catholic Central hockey team, and he was a goalie. They won that state championship at an ice rink, a USA Hockey rink in Plymouth, Michigan, and we worked with the USA Hockey Foundation and actually dedicated that rink in Mitchell's honor. So that ice rink is now known as the Mitchell Kiefer Memorial Ice Rink, which really feels good from the perspective of a father to memorialize your son. But more importantly, we didn't just put Mitchell's name. It's covered with distracted driving messages. There's a locker that has a video that runs with distracted driver statistics and other messages. And that ice rink, there's 500,000 people that visit that ice rink each year for various activities, whether it's hockey games or ice skating competitions, figure skating competitions. And I can't tell you how many people contact me and say, Mr. Kiefer, we're in your son's ice rink right now, and it's given me an opportunity to talk to my children and my family about these dangers, and your message is having a huge impact in this ice rink alone. So there's several other examples I could give, but that's probably the one that's kind of closest to my heart because, every time I visit that ice rink, it's, such fond memories of Mitchell and the state championship, but also a really effective way to spread a message of driver safety.
And what about the technology pillar, Steve? Tell me more about that.
Yeah, so technology is got many aspects to it. In some cases, it's related to awareness, educating people that you need to be more cautious when driving. And in its simplest form, there's a number of technology tools that people can be using right now. The safe driving mode and do not disturb mode on your Apple phones and your Android phones. I mean, those tools work very well if you can just get everyone that and your families and friends to use those tools. Essentially, disabling the phone from receiving texts or calls when you're driving. So those are some of the I call them simple. I would say already in place sort of technologies that we continue to encourage folks to use and really take personal accountability and use them. But there's other things. There's a number of newer technologies that are being developed, driver monitoring tools by some vendors that are sort of watching the driver as they drive and recording these things and hopefully alerting drivers when their eyes are not on the road for a short period. These technologies are being developed. There's other technologies related to blocking the use of phones. Simple technologies like phone bags that sometimes we force young people to use. If the phone is in the bag, it can't receive a signal, and then it's in the car. It's a fairly simple technology. And then maybe the final one that we're really quite proud of, and it's a little bit of a stretch on the technology theme, is the concept of these cable guardrails. I described in my opening comments about the circumstances of Mitchell's crash. Had there been a guardrail on that narrow median on I-96, it would have stopped Mitchell's car from going into oncoming traffic, and he probably wouldn't have even been injured at all. So we worked with the Michigan Department of Transportation on these very simple cable guardrails that you see all over the state. And we actually did a co-funding project, half sponsored by the Kiefer Foundation and half sponsored by MDOT, to put in about 5 miles of cable guardrail at the point where Mitchell's crash occurred. Now, when we did that, we really thought it was kind of a ceremonial thing. I kind of thought, I just wanted that exact point on the highway to be safe. I couldn't imagine, but within the first year, that guardrail was hit 12 times. So it just again says that the simple technology like these cable guardrails, which are really quite inexpensive and cost effective, we know it saved 12 lives in that short period of time. And you continue to see it all over the state where you see these cable guardrails that have been damaged or knocked down. They are effective and they are saving lives.
Steve, as part of the Kiefer Foundation goals, you said you're really focusing on the policy pillar. So tell us what you're working on policy-wise to end distracted driving.
Yeah, so over the last I would say 2 years, we shifted our focus because we knew awareness was important. We know technology solutions will continue to come, and maybe a little later in our discussion here, we'll talk about autonomous driving, which is kind of the ultimate thing that will eliminate the driver errors that cause crashes. But we also realized that legislation and policy can be an extremely important piece of this. And if you reflect back on the progress that's been made, I would say in my lifetime since the 1980s and 90s. When you look at drunk driving in those decades, of course, it was a huge problem. And what we saw is a group of very motivated and very influential people called Mothers Against Drunk Drivers got very active on the legislative front and also in the courts. So they first made sure that there were very stiff drunk driving laws in place. Which was kind of the first step. And then second, they sat in the courtrooms and just made sure that anybody that was guilty of these things received very severe punishment. And, when I was young, that seemed like a crazy group of people and a lot of us didn't understand it until you lose a child. Then you realize exactly why they were doing what they're doing. And if you look over the years now, the drunk driving occurrences have completely changed. And I would even say culturally, for all of your listeners, if you think about the younger generation right now, I mean, I know my kids would never even consider getting behind a wheel after drinking. It's they kind of equate it to I don't know. Holding up a bank or something. You wouldn't do something like that. So behavior has changed completely. And of course there's other things available like Uber and Lyft now, which has also really helped, bring down the need for anyone to be driving under the influence. So I spent a long time on that because I think that whole behavioral change that was the result of drunk driving laws and really it has really had a very significant impact. If I fast forward to the laws that we're working on now, it's about hands-free legislation, which we call this the distracted driving laws that we're talking about now. And really, it basically says that if you're in a vehicle and you're holding the phone for any reason, holding the phone, it becomes a primary offense. Law enforcement can see it, they can pull you over, and you receive a severe ticket. By the way, this is not unusual. This is what most developed countries do around the world. I've spent many years living in Europe. In Europe, if you hold your phone in the car, it's instantly 400, 500 euro penalty. So it's not a new or unusual practice. But we're trying to get these hands-free laws implemented in every state in the country. And we really believe that if the laws are in place and then the awareness and enforcement is in place, and this is really important that we have a tool that law enforcement can use, because right now, laws that ban texting still allow people to hold the phone in the car, and it's just impossible for law enforcement to determine what a person is doing on their phone to distinguish between texting and phone usage. So really, we believe that the hands-free laws will give law enforcement a tool that will basically be able to change behavior, and then through enforcement and education, we're optimistic that we can bring down the traffic crashes significantly. And I would just say that the data supports that. Every state that has implemented these laws has seen significant reductions in crashes and deaths as a result of these hands-free laws.
So, Steve, how can anyone joining our conversation get involved and help?
Yeah, a great question. So we're in the process of re-energizing a campaign that we refer to as Hands-Free Michigan. We first introduced this a couple of years ago, and we agreed to take a bit of a pause during the latest pandemic last year, but it's time now to get re-energized on this. There's now 25 states that have these hands-free laws in place, and as I said, they're all having a very significant impact on reducing crashes and deaths. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to get the law passed here in Michigan. So what we're trying to do right now, there's a bill that's being developed and sponsored in the House right now in Michigan. And our hope and expectation is to get as many people on board as possible to support this bill and to support the passing of a law referred to as hands-free. And we have a goal here to basically get this law brought forward, get the bill brought forward and through the state legislature and passed into law by September of this year.
Well, again, it's the Kiefer Foundation, and there's a lot more at mkiefer.org. That's MKIEFER, or it's probably easier these days just to Google the Kiefer Foundation. And again, their mission is to end distracted driving and all associated traffic deaths and injuries. We're talking with its founder, Stephen Kiefer, who is, as we said, your day job, Steve. You're a part of the senior leadership team at General Motors, and the company recently unveiled a new logo, reportedly to better reflect the company's electrified future. I know we could have a conference on this, Steve, but just in general, what's the state and future of the automotive industry and General Motors in particular?
Well, yeah, thanks for asking. I've been in automotive my entire life. I actually started at General Motors as a 19-year-old Michigan State engineering co-op student, and it's just been an incredible career in the auto industry. But I couldn't be more excited than I am today as to where we're headed as an industry and where we're headed as General Motors. As you mentioned, the new logo is just a piece of it. It's an exciting new logo that really represents the future of GM. And we have a vision at GM of a future of zero crashes, zero emissions, and zero congestion. And again, I'm very proud of what the company's doing in that respect. This concept of zero crashes, ultimately, I mentioned that as we get to autonomous driving, and we will. We're convinced that this will essentially eliminate all traffic crashes related to human error. So we're optimistic about that, but unfortunately, that's many years in the future. And in the meantime, I personally believe that ending distracted driving and keeping drivers' eyes on the road and hands on the wheels, as we say, is probably the best thing we can do to reduce crashes in the short term. The second one I mentioned, the zero emissions, we do believe in an all-electric future, and the plan to roll out a whole portfolio of new battery electric vehicles is just extremely exciting. If you were able to see any of the reviews out of the Consumer Electronics Show this year, the team at General Motors just killed it in that technology show. Just probably more technology than I could talk through in a few minutes here, but I just couldn't be more excited and more proud of the path that GM's on. And it's going to be a really exciting year and a really exciting decade as we forge into the future of the auto industry.
And Steve, how does General Motors define mobility? That's sort of a buzzword we hear a lot, but how does GM define it, and sort of explain the difference between electrification and autonomous? Although they go hand in hand, they are different, aren't they?
Yeah. I mean, electrification has many forms, but in its broadest sense, it's the idea of moving from propulsion systems that are based on internal combustion engines like gasoline and diesel engines into propulsion systems that are driven by electric motors and electricity. I say it that way because I think even fuel cells, hydrogen fuel cells, which are in our future as well, are another way to produce electricity for an electric vehicle. So, and then there's many companies out there that are doing various steps of electrification, hybrid vehicles and so on. But again, we're focused on this all electric future, which is really about battery electric vehicles, and you'll start to see more and more of them rolled out. And I'm especially excited about the new Hummer EV that we recently introduced and revealed. That'll be available later this year, and that is just going to be the highest performing electric truck in the industry, and I couldn't be more excited to get that one out into the market. So that's really electric vehicles. We do believe that autonomous vehicles are probably best suited on a electric vehicle platform, which is our plan. And some of the announcements that you may have seen over these last couple of weeks, a new partnership with Microsoft together with our Cruise automation company in California, really focused on leading the industry in autonomous vehicles. I feel I'm extremely proud of what the GM team has done in developing our autonomous fleet and our autonomous vehicles. But I always say it's one thing for us to brag about it, but over just the last several years, there's been announcements of Honda Motor Company participating in our autonomous activity. Now Microsoft, and even prior to that, SoftBank made a very significant investment. So I would just say some of the world industry and financial leaders are betting on General Motors as it relates to autonomous, and I couldn't be more proud of that work.
And Steve, what about both some challenges and opportunities then for GM to reach these mobility goals?
Yeah, I think the sky's the limit here. There's technology always comes with challenges and risk, but I think one is a pipeline of extremely bright, intelligent, motivated people, and I'm excited in my role participating with the MSU College of Engineering to at least help define some of those needs so that we get some of the best new engineers coming into our company. I think our story at General Motors right now is absolutely fantastic, and I think it's really helping us because I can't tell you how many people want to join the cause, want to join General Motors, whether it's young engineering students or even seasoned industry veterans. A lot of people are looking to General Motors and wanting to be part of the future success story. So I think the human capital and getting the right people in is always important and a challenge, but I think we're well positioned. I think the other thing is, there's a whole area of I would say legislative and infrastructure challenges. Getting electrical charging in place in countries all over the world is not without challenge. And then as you move to the idea of removing the driver from the car in these truly autonomous vehicles, that comes with a lot. Obviously we want to do that with safety as the absolute highest priority, as do all the communities and countries that we work in. So there's some pretty cautious and time-consuming legislative hurdles that need to be overcome.
Really, really exciting days ahead, to be sure, Steve. And we've both mentioned your time at MSU. Take me back to why MSU was the place for you coming out of high school.
Yeah, it's kind of a simple and interesting story. I was a high school senior, and I had first been accepted to MSU and then to the University of Michigan, and those were the only two schools I applied to. I wasn't sure where I wanted to go. I had been a big U of M fan in my middle school days, and became a bit of a Spartan fan in my high school days. And it was as simple as 2 campus visits. I spent one weekend in Ann Arbor at the University of Michigan with some friends, and spent the next weekend at MSU. And I just really fell in love with the campus at MSU. I really nothing against our colleagues from U of M, but I quickly felt much more comfortable and felt like MSU was the right place for me. So I made that decision and never looked back. It was a great 5 years at MSU because I actually was a co-op student with General Motors. So I took every other semester off to work at General Motors as a student, and just had a great college experience at MSU. I must admit, though, after graduating, I decided to go back to school to get an MBA, and I did go to Ann Arbor for that degree. But I have to say my heart is always in East Lansing.
Tell me a little bit more, Steve, about then how your time at MSU did impact you and prepare you for where you are now, and kind of what it means to you to be a Spartan.
Well, I must admit, in my MSU days, we had some pretty rough years from a sporting and football performance level. So I think it taught me at a young age to know how to lose, which is important, and to make sure you can celebrate and tolerate losing as much as you can celebrate and tolerate winning. But more importantly, I think from an education standpoint, I think the MSU education for engineering was really good, really practical. I was actually part of a Baja team, a Society of Automotive Engineering Baja team, where we actually built an off-road vehicle and raced it in a competition up at Michigan Tech. And surprisingly, that project of actually designing, developing, building, and racing an off-road vehicle, it was a great educational experience, and really had a lot of sort of practical implications that kind of helped me as I got into doing it at General Motors.
And Steve, if you can tell me a little bit more about your role on the College of Engineering Alumni Association Advisory Board. I think you've started to answer it by making sure the students are prepared for the future work ahead, but just what do you and your fellow board members work on?
Yeah, it's really an honor and a pleasure to serve with the Dean of Engineering on the advisory board. We meet regularly to talk about the progress that the engineering school is making, some of the investments that the school is making, and really the just the dynamically changing curriculum that's required to prepare our MSU engineering students for the industry ahead. I try to be, fairly vocal on the needs of the automotive industry and specifically the needs of General Motors. We're one of the largest private employers of MSU graduates in the university, so we're fairly important to the university from a hiring standpoint. And I'm usually trying to express what it takes to be successful at General Motors and what we're seeing from our young engineering students and how we should alter curriculums to make sure that they can be most prepared and most successful for an exciting career in the auto industry.
Well, Steve, as we wrap up our conversation, let's circle back to the Kiefer Foundation. What would you like us to keep in mind about the foundation and its goals? And again, how can we help and get involved?
Yeah, I would say a couple of things. I would say first, really think about the idea of, what would it feel like if this happened to you? And it's really hard to get people's attention and involvement until they personalize it. So, I would just ask everyone to think about, what would you do differently? What would you do to protect your life and your children's life and your family if you thought that something you could do different today might save them tomorrow from, a distracted driving related accident? That's a hard thing to imagine, but I'd ask people to recognize that, we never in our lives imagined something like this could happen to us, and then one day your life is shattered. So with that in mind, then I would just say a couple of additional things. The next I would just say it's about personal accountability, because this is a behavioral change and every one of us have to participate. I'm slightly embarrassed to admit how actively distracted I used to drive before this happened to me. I was somebody who could drive really well with my knee on the wheel and looking at the phone in one hand and maybe drinking a coffee in another. And I thought I was very cautious about it because I knew the risk, but I still admit that I did it. And then it happens to you and you realize just how senseless that is. So I would say from a personal accountability, if people could just really internalize that and say, I don't need to be on this phone while I'm driving. It is just way too dangerous, and it's just not worth the loss of your life or your children's life or the other people on the road. So use tools like the do not disturb mode and the safe drive mode that are readily available. Commit to them, use them, keep your eyes on the road, drive safely, and make sure your children and all your friends are doing the same. That's kind of the easy first step, and if everybody could just do that, we'd be in a better place. And then in a broader sense, for anyone that's willing to help us with the cause of Hands-Free Michigan, I would just say be very vocal on your support of getting laws in place that will help make our roads safer. Speak to your senators, speak to your congressmen, speak to your elected officials. Be vocal on this, because it does have an impact, and we're seeing overwhelming support for these hands-free laws. So there is just no reason why we shouldn't be able to push them over the edge and get these things implemented this year.
Well, Steve, thank you so much for talking with me today and sharing Mitchell's story and all you're doing to honor his legacy. I'm sure while he's still in your heart, he's also smiling and proud looking down from heaven, and appreciate all this great work you're doing.
Well, again, Russ, thank you so much for the time. Thank you for letting me tell the story. And I really hope that it has an impact on some of your listeners and that we can get some support for the things we're doing. I hope everybody can stay safe and go green.
And go white. And please find more again at mkiefer.org. That's MKIEFER.org, or just Google the Kiefer Foundation. And I'm Russ White for the Spartan Story on MSU Today.